World War II, spanning from 1939 to 1945, stands as the largest and most destructive conflict in human history, involving over 100 million people from more than 30 countries. The war reshaped the global order and left lasting impacts that continue to affect the world today. To understand the war in its full depth, we must explore its origins, the major events that occurred, and its profound aftermath. The roots of World War II lie in the aftermath of World War I and the treaties that followed, particularly the Treaty of Versailles. Signed in 1919, this treaty placed heavy reparations on Germany, blamed it for the war, and drastically reduced its military capacity. However, this punishment did little to stabilize Europe and instead led to widespread resentment in Germany, creating fertile ground for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The interwar period saw the rise of fascist and authoritarian regimes across Europe and Asia. In Italy, Benito Mussolini established a fascist dictatorship in the 1920s, while in Japan, military leaders expanded their control over the government. These regimes believed in aggressive nationalism and expansionism, which directly contradicted the post-World War I peace agreements. In Germany, Hitler's Nazi Party came to power in 1933, promising to restore Germany's former glory and overturn the post-war order. The global economic depression of the 1930s also contributed to the rise of totalitarian regimes. The Great Depression created instability and hardship, which the authoritarian leaders promised to resolve. Their aggressive rhetoric, emphasis on nationalism, and promises of territorial expansion appealed to many, particularly in Germany and Italy. The immediate cause of World War II was Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939. Hitler had been building up his military and expanding German territory through the remilitarization of the Rhineland and the annexation of Austria, Anschluss, in 1938. Hitler also forced the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia, taking control of the Sudetenland in the Munich Agreement of 1938, which was made by Britain, France, and Italy in an attempt to appease Germany. This strategy of appeasement ultimately failed. Poland's invasion triggered Britain and France to declare war on Germany on September 3, 1939. However, despite the formal declaration, both countries did little to assist Poland in its defense. Poland fell within weeks, and the Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, invaded Poland from the east, in a secret pact with Hitler, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which had been signed just days before the invasion. The pact divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, allowing both totalitarian states to expand without interference. In the early stages of the war, Germany used a new form of warfare known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. It combined fast-moving infantry, tanks, and airstrikes to overwhelm opponents quickly. This strategy was devastatingly effective and allowed Germany to conquer much of Western Europe, including Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France, in a matter of months. In 1940, Germany turned its attention to Britain. The Battle of Britain, fought primarily in the air, was a pivotal moment in the war. The Luftwaffe, German Air Force, attempted to destroy the Royal Air Force, RAF, and gain control of the skies over Britain, but despite heavy bombing, the RAF held firm, forcing Hitler to abandon plans for an invasion of Britain. This was a significant early victory for the Allies. Meanwhile, Japan was expanding its empire in Asia. In 1937, Japan invaded China, marking the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan sought to dominate the Pacific region, and by 1941, it had control of much of China and Southeast Asia, including French Indochina. Japan's aggressive actions were a key factor in the eventual entry of the United States into the war. For the first few years of the conflict, the United States maintained a policy of neutrality, despite increasing tensions with Axis powers. However, the war in Europe and the Pacific had a growing impact on American interests. In 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt began providing material support to Britain and the Soviet Union through the Lend-Lease Act, which allowed the US to send arms and supplies to countries fighting the Axis powers. The turning point came on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a surprise attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack killed over 2,400 Americans and destroyed much of the US Pacific Fleet. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan, bringing the country into World War II. On December 11, 1941, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States, cementing the US role in the conflict. The entry of the United States into the war dramatically shifted the balance of power. The US industrial capacity allowed it to outproduce the Axis powers in terms of weapons, ammunition, and other supplies. Additionally, the US provided crucial reinforcements to both the European and Pacific theaters of war. In 1942, the war reached several key turning points. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway, fought in June 1942, was a major naval victory for the United States. The US Navy destroyed much of the Japanese carrier fleet, halting Japan's expansion in the Pacific. On the Eastern Front, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, which had begun in June 1941, had stalled at the gates of Moscow. The Battle of Stalingrad, fought from August 1942 to February 1943, marked the turning of the tide in favor of the Allies. The Soviet Red Army encircled and defeated the German Sixth Army, inflicting a devastating blow to Hitler's ambitions in the east. The Soviet Union began a series of offensives that pushed the Germans back across Eastern Europe. In North Africa, the British, led by General Bernard Montgomery, fought a series of battles against the German Afrika Korps, led by General Erwin Rommel. The turning point came at the Second Battle of El Alamein in late 1942, when the Allies decisively defeated Rommel, securing the Suez Canal and allowing the Allies to launch an invasion of Italy. In 1943, the Allies invaded Italy, a soft underbelly of Axis Europe. After the fall of Mussolini's regime, Italy officially switched sides, but fierce fighting continued in the Italian peninsula for the remainder of the war. In 1944, the Allies planned and executed Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion of Normandy, on June 6. The invasion was the largest amphibious assault in history and marked the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe. After securing the beachheads, the Allies advanced through France, liberating Paris in August 1944. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union continued its relentless push westward, liberating Eastern Europe and advancing into Germany. In early 1945, the Allies converged on Germany from both sides. The Soviet Red Army captured Berlin in May 1945, and Hitler committed suicide in his bunker on April 30, 1945, marking the end of the Nazi regime. On May 7, 1945, Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allies, bringing the war in Europe to a close. While Germany had been defeated, Japan continued its resistance in the Pacific. The US launched a series of island-hopping campaigns, capturing strategic islands in the Pacific and moving closer to Japan. The Battle of Iwo Jima and the Battle of Okinawa, both in 1945, were bloody and costly, with thousands of casualties on both sides. In July 1945, the United States tested the first atomic bomb in the desert of New Mexico. President Harry S. Truman decided to use these new weapons to bring a swift end to the war with Japan. On August 6, 1945, the US dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, killing over 70,000 people instantly. 3 days later, on August 9, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Japan, facing total devastation, surrendered on August 15, 1945, officially ending World War II. The aftermath of World War II was profound. The war caused the deaths of an estimated 70 million people, including military personnel and civilians. It led to widespread destruction, particularly in Europe and Asia. Cities, industries, and entire economies were shattered, and the cost of reconstruction was astronomical. The war also had significant political and social consequences. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the two superpowers, leading to the Cold War, a geopolitical rivalry that would dominate global politics for the next several decades. The war also led to the formation of the United Nations, an international organization created to promote peace and prevent future conflicts. The Holocaust, one of the darkest chapters of the war, resulted in the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews, as well as millions of others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. The atrocities committed during the war prompted international efforts to prevent future genocides, leading to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. World War II was a cataclysmic event that forever changed the course of human history. It altered the political landscape, led to the establishment of the United Nations, and set the stage for the Cold War. The war's lasting effects are still felt today, as it shaped the modern world in ways that continue to influence global politics, culture, and society.